Shemai Pretty and welcome back to my channel. My name's Caitlin Anwin for anyone who's new here, and let's get back into building in Planet Zoo. And for the next habitat in this Wetlands Safari Park Zoo, it is going to be a capybara habitat. And I'm doing the capybaras today because it was a suggestion in a previous speed build to build a habitat for the capybaras because they were very cute, and they are very cute. I absolutely adore them, so I'm going to build them a habitat from one of my favorite places to visit. I know we have the new bathing animations for the capybara, so I wanted to make like hot springs for them, and the only hot springs I've ever been to really are the ones that I went to when I went to Iceland. So I really wanted to make like a Blue Lagoon type habitat for the capybara. So I'm actually going to be playing around a little bit with the terraforming to start with, because I wanted to make 3 separate bathing pools instead of the one large body of water. I tried to use the new terraforming tool, but I haven't quite got the hang of that yet. So I just ended up using the flatten foundation tool. I find it easier to use because it'll always keep to the same level that you start with. So wherever you click to start with, it'll just flatten out wherever that spot is. And I find I've got a little bit more control with that to make the water look more like the water from the Blue Lagoon. I wanted to play around with the water customization to make it kind of like a milky blue. It's the only way I can really explain it, and that's what it looks like at the Blue Lagoon. I'm pretty sure it's to do with some sort of mineral, but I can't remember which one it is now. But basically when I went, doesn't sound great, but there's like minerals and stuff in, it's not soil, in the like water on the ground. There's minerals and stuff that you can put on your skin to make your skin rejuvenate, and it obviously changes the color of the water. The blue was nice, like the milky blue color, but around the edges is usually a lot whiter. So like the shallower the water, the more white it looked. So I wanted to like give that effect. So I thought I'd use the snow rocks, the white rocks, to kind of line the edges of the pools to make it look like the edges were more white than blue. And this build is a lot of rock placement to make it look more like the Blue Lagoon. I used the align to surface tool so I could get the right sort of angle to start with, and then I used advanced move tool to try and get it to lay as flat as possible onto the like bank of the water. I didn't want the rocks to stick out too much from the line of the water, but still have it kind of show from a distance. But I also didn't want it to be too thick to stop the capybara from being able to get into the water. It was also a bit more difficult to place all the rocks down with the water already placed in, but I wanted to make sure that I had the right level of rock. If I took the water out, I could have started pulling the rocks higher and higher as I went along, because there's no reference by it. But having the water there allows me to actually see where I need to stop. And I'm also keeping the rocks in separate groups as well. So for each pool, there's going to be a separate group of the white rocks lining the edges. Just because there's going to be so many different pieces to this that if everything was all in one group, it'd be really hard to like multi-select things. But yeah, this was really relaxing. I had an audiobook on, I was listening to Clockwork Angel. So I was having a lovely time, because it's probably well over 10 times I've read that book. So it's almost like watching like a favourite film, like a favourite childhood film, listening to the audiobook of that, because I hear one little bit and I can speak along with it, just like a film. Doesn't mean it's always cheerful, because it's never always cheerful with the Shadowhunter books, but I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook as I was placing all of these rocks down, especially because I know the sequel series to the Clockwork ones, the Chain series. I never actually call them what they're meant to be called. Infernal Devices and The Last Hours. The author announced that the book series had been pushed back a little bit from publication from what I thought it was going to be, and I'm kind of sad about that, but I cheered myself up by listening to the sort of prequels to those books instead. I almost got left in the Blue Lagoon. It's such a silly story. Obviously everything's fine now. It's been 5 years since I went there now, but we weren't aware that our appointment, our reservation to go there was one of the last ones of the day. And while we were in there, there was an announcement that the whole place was going to be shutting in 15 minutes. But I have naturally curly hair, and this water is technically seawater, so it was really difficult. I could not get ready in 15 minutes. So me and my mum and a friend we made from Australia who was staying at the hotel we were staying at, we tried to get out as quickly as possible and get ready as soon as possible, but the bus that was supposed to take us back to the hotel had already gone by the time we got out of the venue itself, out of the building, and we ended up going on a bus that was not meant for us, stopping where they weren't supposed to stop, and getting another bus from the company that we were supposed to go with to get us back to the hotel. But yeah, we were almost left there, almost stranded at the Blue Lagoon. I'm glad I can laugh about this now, because it was just not a nice experience, and I don't know what I would have done without my mum there. And if it wasn't for the nice bus driver who took us to a bus station outside of the trip that they were supposed to take, we very much would have been left there overnight, because no other buses were coming because the whole place was shutting. But getting back onto it, the capybaras are not shy animals, and guests can actually enter the habitat. So I thought I would make this a walkthrough habitat. I'll get back to what the guests will go through or guests will use later on. I want to finish the rock placement first, but I have put a nice pathway along the edge of one of the pools and a bridge over one of the pools as well, because I thought that would be nice. And just adding in some rocks now, trying to hide the terrain. Adding in rocks, I haven't been doing that for the past I don't know how long. It's been half hour for me, but it certainly hasn't been half an hour for you. I would have liked to use the aquatic rocks so they'd be darker, so they'd look more like volcanic rock, but the dark grey still works really nicely against the white and the blue. But doing the separation barriers, or the separation rocks from each pool, was really fun, trying to make them the most random and jagged that I could, because I'll put a picture down. There's other pools that you don't necessarily go in, but they surround the area. It was very jagged, broken rocks on the surroundings around the pools. So I wanted this to look really jagged, and I think that's the best way to make a natural rock formation. Sometimes I try to make my rocks look too blended into each other. It's best to try and make it as random as possible. So you don't want the same type of rock next to each other too many times, and it's better to use the advanced move tool so you can rotate them 360 and never just place a rock on the ground. With these rocks, they're completely 3D. You don't have a flat bottom to it, so it doesn't look like a rock if you just place it on the ground. If you lower it into the ground a bit to make it look like it's kind of got a flat bottom, it looks more real. I like to find the pointed edges of each rock as well, because rocks aren't smooth really, so I like to find a point on wherever part of the rock it is as a top or a side, to then lower it into the terrain to make it feel more natural. I've used the Tundra rocks in a temperate zoo, so the terrain paint is not matching the rocks, and it kind of looks a bit jarring. I don't know, it doesn't blend nicely in with each other, because the tundra rocks are like this dark grey, and the temperate rocks are more of a warm brown, so it doesn't blend in nicely with each other. So the jagged rocks that I've done for like the edges didn't go with the terrain paint around the pool, so instead I've used the thin rocks again to line the edges. It also makes the light blue water and the white lining stand out more as well, and it kind of gives the effect that this is in the tundra biome. But I think we are done with the rocks now. Finally! At least it was probably less than 10 minutes for you, I don't know. Oh, it has been an hour for me now. Maybe it's been a little bit more than 10 minutes for you. But I spent 6+ hours placing these rocks, so you're lucky I've sped up this 8 times speed and I've edited some out. But I wanted like a modern handrail banister for the bridge, so I went with the glass panels. Still trying to make it base game, trying to find something that's small enough to line the panels without like blocking off the view too much, because obviously the guests are going to walk over this bridge and they're going to see the capybara swimming around the lagoon. I think that's what I'm going to end up calling it. And grey to go with the volcanic rock theme. I didn't want these to be blue. I thought it would look a little bit more modern with the black and grey. And I wanted to find something that would look like it was supporting the round beam above the glass. And I tried a couple of different objects. The smallest thing that I could find that I could recolor and almost switch off is the New World light bulbs. It seems a bit odd, but they work as little supports. And just lining those along the bridge. Tried not to distract too much from the pools themselves, because the main focus for this is going to be the lagoon. I didn't spend more than 6 hours placing rocks for that not to be the main focus. And then I realised that the capybara need hard shelter and I have not given them any. So I thought I would tie in the hard shelter with the guests entrance gate for the walkthrough part of the habitat, just to cover the gate as well, because most of the habitat barriers are null barriers. I've gone through my sandbox settings to switch off escaping, just so the habitats look a little nicer. I don't really like the habitat barriers, especially when you're making more of a natural looking habitat. I don't like the look of the barriers, it looks like habitat then. So I wanted to hide the gate rather than it just looking like it's floating there. If there's barriers, it looks fine, but when there's not barriers, it doesn't quite look right. I wanted the building to kind of match in with the entrance building for the whole zoo. So I went with that colour scheme, so it looks more like a building meant to be for the zoo rather than a building meant to be for the habitat. And some of the building was kind of floating because of the terrain levels weren't quite the same for the different sides of the building. So I gave it like a foundation accent colour. And I went with the dark blue for the most contrast between the walls and the foundation, plus the light blue from the water. If I went with the teal colour that I used as like the other accent colour for the colour scheme for the whole zoo, it wouldn't have given off the right contrast because the light blue and the teal didn't really go, so I went with the more navy dark blue. And using the small pitched roofs like how I did the factory, so it's kind of like a mix of styles from the entrance building and the factory building for the other side, because this is kind of in the middle of the two. Just knew I just didn't really have time to faff with this too much. I wanted it to look nice and to fit in with the style of the whole zoo and the style of the habitat surrounding it, but I didn't want it to be too complicated because the focus of this is going to be the Blue Lagoon pools. And as like a little extra detail, I added in a education board, framed it with the dark blue to give it more of a contrast then as well, and added in some speakers along the walkthrough path for the guests. Education along the habitat. I didn't want to add too many, what do you call it? man-made things in the habitat itself. I wanted it to feel really natural, like the guests were just walking through a natural environment rather than a zoo habitat, like a man-made habitat, like they were walking through an experience in the Blue Lagoon like I did. Slightly less rushed, I hope. But yep, that's pretty much it. This time for the Pretties now. The capybara can bathe in these pools. This was fun, really relaxing as well, just placing lots of rocks down. I hope it wasn't too repetitive. There's a lot of different techniques with the different rocks around the area, but I hope I gave some tips for you as well to create your own natural rock formations. And as usual, if you have any ideas for any animals to build habitats for in this zoo, preferably ones that like swimming, like aquatic animals from the Wetlands Animal Park, any of the other parks, base game animals, I don't mind, and any ideas for habitats as well. I would love your suggestions. And yeah, I'm going to leave it off there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button. And if you haven't already and you would like to, it would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe. And hit the bell to be notified whenever I upload a new video. I upload speed builds on Wednesdays and shorts tutorials on Saturdays. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you next time. Goodbye.